What is up, you guys? This is All Any Day 1 on the PS4, and I'm going to be giving you a rotation and ability guide, and this is going to be for the Knight. So, for those of you that don't know, the Knight is probably, in my opinion, one of the best, well, one of the only two tanks in the class are in the game, but hands down the best tank class in the game. It can also put out some good damage as well. Also, you might want to keep in mind there is a weapon called Seth and Python, the Viper Guard. It's a pretty good weapon for the Knight. Unfortunately, it doesn't have endurance or block, but it does have all damage. It's a legendary for the Alcanito, and what it does is it basically just lets you use a free ability, which is your pull ability, and it just does damage over time, which is pretty nice, and it costs nothing as well. But we're going to go ahead and get to the abilities. So you have two stances. You have the basic stance, and I just call it the defensive stance. So you have basic stance and your barrier. In basic stance, your combos, you have smashing strike, square square. You have straight attack 2, square triangle, crushing blow, triple square, and resolute strike, double square and triangle. Barrier, you just have lunge, which is double square, and then straight attack, which is square triangle. Now with the straight attack, it says inflicts 3.65 million damage to surrounding enemies. The Knight brings up a shield that absorbs damage equal to 0.33% of the Knight's max health for each affected enemy for 2 seconds. And then crushing blow inflicts 6.06 million damage to the selected enemy and 2.03 million damage to enemies around them. Restores 2 points of willpower and activates impulse charge that hits the main target. Crushing blow inflicts 120% more damage when impulse charge is activated, as well as to enemies affected by stun, fear, blind, or disorient. Damage to enemies affected by slow is increased by 60%. And then you have resolute strike. A series of strikes that inflicts 5.71 million damage. The attacks can be used for 50 willpower. In that case, the attacks will inflict 17.1 million damage and cause a wound that deals 1.55 million damage every second for 3 seconds and is refreshed when the target moves. And then for the barrier, it just has lunge, which says a series of attacks inflicts 5.5 million damage to the enemy and causes a wound that inflicts 388,000 damage every second for 3 seconds and stacks up to 5 times. Straight attack 2 inflicts 3.65 million damage. You already heard that from the basic stance. Same thing as the basic stances. So now we're going to go down to the abilities. You have spear attack, battering ram, resolute rebuff, havoc, falcon attack, barrier, tantrum, spear throw, whiplash, and mighty swing. And then your talents, you have fortitude. So with battering ram, it says inflicts 2.68 million damage to all enemies in front of the Knight. If at least one enemy is hit, activates impulse charge. If you hold down the button, the Knight will charge forward, delivering a blow at the end of the run. Requires 2 dash charges. Collision with the target will end the run. If the target is hit, 1 dash charge is restored. When impulse charge is activated, battering ram stuns enemies for 2 seconds and inflicts 120% more damage. So you would normally use battering ram as your opener, as the ability you would use to start off a fight, like against the boss or whatever. You would just dash in, or not dash, you would just hold triangle or hold Y to get yourself into the combat. And then you have resolute rebuff, absorbs all incoming damage as long as the Knight stands still while using it up to 3 seconds. When it ends, it inflicts damage to all nearby enemies in the amount equal to the damage absorbed, but no more than 25% of the Knight's max health. Monsters are forced to attack the Knight for the duration of the attack and 3 seconds after it ends. So resolute rebuff is a good ability. to use when you know the boss is gonna do a heavy damage or heavy attack or an AoE attack that you can't really move from. It's also good when you're trying to pull aggro from enemies. My bad. I'm like having a. I'm always messing up with my words. But yeah, you would use Resolute Rebuff when you're trying to pull multiple aggro. You would use it if you're trying to protect yourself from massive damage or just from any AoE. Like it says, it'll only inflict 25% of the knight's max health. Well, that's where it caps out from, so it can be less than that, but it'll only go up to 25% of the knight's max health. Now you have Havoc, inflicts 6.09 million damage to enemies in a large area around the knight, tossing them up in the air and pulling them toward the knight. After landing, their movement speed is reduced by 75% for 3 seconds. Inflicts 25% more damage if it hits 3 enemies. Damage is increased by an extra 5% for each enemy above 3. So Havoc is going to be a really good ability, especially when there's multiple multiple enemies, multiple smaller enemies like any of the minions. Because you're generally going to just try to keep pulling them away from your allies, and this is a good way to get all the enemies bunched up all in one. So when you get them all bunched up, it'll make it a lot easier for your allies to use their AoE abilities, and it'll make it easier for you too. For when you use Havoc, you would use Resolute Rebuff, so that way all of those enemies around you are attacking you. And then now you have Falcon Attack, which is a 2-second cooldown. Falcon Attack inflicts 6.99 million damage to an enemy at a range of up to 30 yards and applies Infirmity that increases the damage inflicted by the knight by 30% for 6 seconds. Falcon Attack also charges your spear. The next attack with the charged spear will inflict extra damage equal to 3.32 million damage. So with Falcon Attack, as you can see, it basically buffs your damage for the knight, and you can use this as much as you want until you run out of resources. So once you run out of resources, you can't use it until you get 25 resources back. But you normally want to try to keep Falcon Attack on your enemy as much as possible. That way you're always going to be dealing damage to them, a lot of damage. And the Falcon Attack can also be used in a ranged area too, so you can hit an enemy from afar, or you can use it on enemies right up on you. Generally I use it on bosses. I don't worry too much about it on the smaller enemies, especially if there's a lot of them. I only use it on the bosses and elites. So now you have Spear Throw. It's an 8-second cooldown. Throws a spear at the enemy, inflicting 3.69 million damage and enforcing the target to attack the knight for 3 seconds. The ability deals 200% more damage if the enemy is more than 10 yards away. So like it says, 200% more damage if the enemy is 10 yards away. So what you could do is you could use Falcon Attack, then you can use Spear Throw, then Battering Ram, if that's what you decide to do. That's just for extra damage. But this is generally for a tank anyways, so you don't really have to worry about that extra 200% damage, but that extra 200% damage will help you out. But yeah, I normally just use Spear Throw. Anytime I have Spear Throw off its cooldown, I just use Spear Throw on the boss, so that way I get the aggro. Plus it doesn't use up any resources. It's just an 8-second cooldown. And then you have Tantrum. So Tantrum is a 1.5-minute cooldown. It says generates 100 points of willpower, increases the knight's damage dealt by 40%, increases the range of weapons by 50%, and abilities that consume willpower will create a shield around the knight that absorbs damage equal to 15% of the knight's maximum health for 4 seconds. Duration of it lasts for 20 seconds. Mighty Swing reduces the cooldown of the ability by 30 seconds. Mighty Swing, I'm trying to figure out what that was again. I'm thinking it's Straight Attack, but I don't necessarily know what Mighty Attack is. or Mighty Swing. But anyways, yeah, so I only use Tantrum on boss fights or if there's too many enemies on me, so that way I can use it as a I can use the shield that you get from Tantrum, because when you get, the way you can get your shield is you can either use Havoc or you can use Falcon Attack. I believe you can use, no you cannot. Alright, so yeah, you can either use Falcon or Havoc, which would be using your resources, because whenever you use your resources, you get a shield up to 15% of your max health. And then not just that, but you also do get increased damage. So generally you would probably want to make sure you do have Falcon Attack on your enemies, so that way you're getting that extra 30% plus that extra 40% damage. So you're looking at 90% more damage. And then the range is also increased, so that means you can pull more enemies as well, or enemies that are further away from you. Next, you have Barrier, defensive stance that reduces the incoming damage by 25%, but willpower regeneration rate is reduced by 50%. Using abilities that consume willpower make the barrier last 3 seconds longer, and it absorbs twice as much damage, reflecting half of the absorbed damage back at the enemy. The amount of reflected damage cannot exceed 12% of the knight's maximum health. Using Lunge restores 1 point of willpower and extends the duration of enhanced barrier by 1 second. So Lunge would be, oh, that's not Lunge, that is Lunge. The Spear Attack, Lunge, either way, it's the same thing. So Barrier is what you're going to want to use as well when you're focusing on being a tank. You don't want to be in combat as a tank without Barrier, because that extra 25% damage reduction is going to help you so much, especially if you are completely spec'd in as a tank, meaning your gear is all your gear has general defense. You're looking at like maybe 40% general defense, which is 40% damage reduction, plus this extra 25%. You're gonna be tanking like a boss pretty much. And then you got Whiplash, which is an 8-minute cooldown. It says restores 100% of the knight's maximum health and inflicts 16.6 million damage to nearby enemies. Whiplash only happens when you die, so this is basically you resurrecting from the dead, and you can use it every 8 minutes. So try to make sure you don't use it when you don't need to use it, meaning if you know your team is going to be able to kill the enemy, don't use Whiplash or killing the boss. If a self-res is gonna pop up pretty soon, don't worry about it. Or if someone can revive you, don't worry about using this, because you don't want to waste it, because you may need it whenever you're on a crucial part of the mission or whatever you're doing. And then you have Mighty Swing. Oh, this is Mighty Swing. Okay, so Mighty Swing is obviously the finisher, but it's also going to be useful for Tantrum, because it reduces the cooldown for Tantrum by 30 seconds. So you would probably want to make sure you can use Tantrum. So as a finisher, it'll work on the mini enemies, and I believe elites as well. Yeah, so it'll work on both elites and minions, but it only works when they have 1 bar of health left. And then Fortitude, it says, or I think it's half a health bar. It doesn't matter anyways. So Fortitude, it says increases the damage of impulse charge by 30% and restores 12 points of willpower. Killing an enemy immediately restores an impulse charge. If the charge was already ready, the knight gains an additional impulse charge. The knight can gain up to 2 additional charges at a time, and the knight generates 400% more threat. So like it says, whenever your impulse charge does more damage by 30% and restores 12 of your willpower, and then when you kill an enemy, you immediately restore your impulse charge, and whenever you use your impulse charge, or if it activates, you gain 400% more threat, meaning you get the aggro a lot easier. So that's actually a really useful one, because you're able to use impulse charge with Battering Ram. So when you hit at least one enemy with Battering Ram, even if you just tap triangle on the enemy, it'll activate Impulse Charge. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the abilities. I'm going to go ahead and do it on these smaller enemies right here. So you have triangle, or Y if you're on Xbox. What you would do with this is you would make sure you hold it down if you're in a distance. So you can either start off the fight with using spear throw, or you can start off with using the Battering Ram. I normally just use Battering Ram first to get myself all the way up on the enemies, but if you want to get the aggro and get that extra 200% damage first, then by all means use spear throw. But this is what Battering Ram looks like. And then so these enemies kind of have low health anyway, so they'll die pretty easily. But yeah, as you can see, it uses your stamina bar on the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and show again, and that's what it does right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish these guys off real quick. Alright, so now you're gonna use Havoc. So as soon as you're up here on everyone, make sure you are in defensive stance, and once you are on all the ads and the boss, if you have a bunch of ads on you, you're gonna just go ahead and use Havoc and pull all of them towards you. And then once you do that, you're just gonna hit square then triangle, so that way you can build a shield on yourself for a few seconds. That'll basically be the only ability you're gonna be using the whole time. Sometimes you will use square to apply damage over time on the enemies, but square triangle is what you're gonna want to focus on using the most, so that way you can keep on building up the shields. And you would just keep doing that. You would keep spamming R1 and square and triangle, and then occasionally you would use the spear throw as well. Normally you would want to use spear throw on the enemies that are elite types, that have more health, that will do more damage, because those are the ones you want to get the aggro from. Or if you see an enemy straying away, like let's say this dummy right here is straying away from me, then that's when I'm going to want to use that spear throw so it comes back towards me. Also, after you use Battering Ram, go ahead and just use circle or B, so that way you know for a fact that all those enemies are on you, because that's going to let you take the aggro even more, because they're all going to be focused on you when you do that. So just being a tank against a bunch of trash mobs really isn't a big deal. You generally don't need a tank for that. Sometimes there will be a point to where having a tank is going to be useful though, when there's a ton of ads that you can't really DPS all them down. So having a tank, being able to know what to do in that type of situation is going to help. Now on a boss, it's going to be a little different, somewhat the same, but you won't worry about using Havoc. So everything's the same. You're going to run up to the boss and then spear throw and then eagle and then just keep the aggro. So now the way you're going to know you have the aggro when you use spear throw is the boss is going to have a purple triangle on their head like that. So that means you have aggro, and you'll still have the aggro for a good while. The only way you'll lose aggro is if someone is doing a lot of DPS and just their DPS basically takes the boss's aggro from you. If that happens and your spear throw is on cooldown, just go ahead and use circle or B, because that way all the enemies around you will get aggroed back onto you. So that's pretty much all you're going to do. You're going to just keep doing this, and then if you feel like you need to, like you really have to, go ahead and use Tantrum. I only use Tantrum if my if I'm taking a little too much damage, or if there's just a lot of enemies, or there's just a lot of AoE stuff going on. So this is what Tantrum would look like. And when Tantrum goes off, you're just going to want to start spamming pretty much Havoc and your Falcon. And then Spear, just pretty much. There's no real rotation with this, with the Knights being a tank. You just pretty much want to make sure you keep all the aggros to yourself as much as possible. Make sure you have all the trash mobs on you, So like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and go to these guys. So I'm gonna try to get these guys. If they're kind of scattered all over, I would just use that. And yeah, that's pretty much it though. There's not, like I said, there's no real rotation with the knight for tanking. There probably is when it comes to DPS, but in general, you wouldn't really want to use a knight for DPS. You would normally use like an actual DPS class. But yeah, so I'm just gonna go over it again. So when you're going against trash mobs, you're gonna go ahead and pull yourself up to them, use Havoc, and then once you use Havoc, go ahead and use Circle, so that way you know for a fact all those enemies are on you and they're hitting you. When they're hitting you, they're adding damage to your reflective barrier or whatever it's called, so that way you can basically hit them back with all that damage. Not all the damage, but a good amount of damage. And then for the boss, you're gonna make sure you either use Spear Throw or you run in and Battering Ram them, and then just go ahead and hit the boss a few times, and then use the Falcon, and then go ahead and use Tantrum if you would like to use that, if you need to use that. And then if there's a bunch of enemies around the boss, go ahead and use Havoc as well. And make sure you keep that Spear Throw on the boss too, so anytime you see that Spear Throw done with its cooldown, go ahead and use it again. And that's pretty much it. So if this video helped you out at all, go and leave a like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know down in the comment section. Yeah, that's pretty much it though. I guess, oh, you know what, for the symbols, before I forget, so the symbols I would recommend for tanking would be Emblems of Protection, Emergency Maneuver Dodge, Adaptation. You could use Pain Shock. Wave would be a really good one to use. Reflective Barrier is a really good one to use as well. But in the Demon's Invasion for D2, Reflective Barrier doesn't work that well. Reflective Barrier honestly doesn't work that well in a lot of places. So in my opinion, I wouldn't really care too much about Reflective Barrier. I would just use Wave, maybe Pain Shock, and Home Technique. And then you've got Defense Mode, Reactive Materials, and Stolen Energy. So you want to have Emblems of Protection, Emergency Maneuver Dodge, Adaptation, Defense Mode, Reactive Materials, Stolen Energy, and the Matarchus Staff. But for this row, you can choose whatever you would like to choose. I'm going with a Wave. I don't know why I put Pain Shock, but Wave is what I'm going to go with. I normally choose between Wave and Home Technique though. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If this video helped you out at all, go and leave a like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions, concerns, or anything, let me know down in the comment section. And yeah, so hopefully you guys start tanking some pretty heavy stuff and enjoy it. This is All Day Day 1 on the PS4. Have a good day, good night, and peace.